Before we begin tonight's journey into the darker corners of ancient history, take a moment to imagine something. Imagine you are living thousands of years ago. There are no police detectives carefully gathering evidence, no lawyers standing beside you in court, no appeals, no legal rights hanging on a wall for everyone to see. In fact, there might not even be a proper prison nearby. Instead, there is a ruler, there are local officials, and there are laws that can change depending on who is in charge. Welcome to the ancient world. Now, if you happen to be accused of a crime back then, things could get difficult very quickly. Modern people often think of justice as something that should be fair and balanced. We expect investigations. We expect proof. We expect rules. Ancient societies often had a different goal. Their main concern was keeping order. If a village stayed peaceful, if taxes were paid, and if people obeyed the ruler, then things were considered successful. The comfort of an individual person was usually much lower on the priority list. Very low, actually. Sometimes it was not even on the list at all. Many ancient governments believed that fear was useful. A frightened population was less likely to rebel, less likely to steal, less likely to challenge authority. At least that was the theory. Whether it actually worked is another question. Humans have been ignoring warnings for thousands of years, but rulers kept trying. Imagine you are a farmer in a small ancient town. You wake up before sunrise. You work in the fields all day. Life is already difficult enough without modern medicine, electricity, or comfortable shoes. Then one afternoon, a rumor spreads through town. Someone has been accused of stealing grain. Soon everyone gathers in the town square. Children climb onto walls to get a better view. Merchants pause their work. Neighbors whisper to one another. And at the center of it all stands the accused person. The message is clear. Look what happens when you break the rules. Punishment was often public because it was not just meant for the accused. It was meant for everyone watching. Ancient governments loved examples. And unfortunately for some people, they loved making examples out of real human beings. Another important thing to understand is that many ancient societies placed enormous value on confessions. Today, a confession is only one piece of evidence. Back then, many authorities treated a confession as the ultimate proof. If someone admitted guilt, the case was considered solved. Simple. The problem, of course, is that people will say many things when they are scared. Ancient officials did not always think about that. Or if they did, they often did not care. Their reasoning was straightforward. An innocent person would surely tell the truth. A guilty person would eventually confess. At least that was the belief. Reality was often much messier. But ancient legal systems were not always built around reality. They were built around ideas of authority, order, and tradition. And tradition can be a very stubborn thing. Some customs survived for centuries simply because people had always done them that way. Imagine trying to explain modern legal rights to an ancient judge. You might say, everyone deserves a fair trial. The judge might stare at you for a moment, then ask why you are wasting his time. Different worlds, different assumptions. It is also important to remember that ancient civilizations were not all the same. Egypt had its own laws. Mesopotamia had its own traditions. Greece had different rules depending on the city. Rome changed its legal system many times over the centuries. There was no single ancient way of doing things. Still, one common theme appears again and again. The law often protected social order more than individual freedom. Your social status mattered enormously. A wealthy noble might receive one treatment. A poor laborer might receive another. An enslaved person might receive something entirely different. Justice was not always blind. In many places, justice could see very clearly who was rich, powerful, and connected. And it often acted accordingly. This may sound unfair to modern ears. That is because it was. But for many people living at the time, this system seemed normal. They had grown up with it. Their parents had lived under it. Their grandparents had lived under it. When something has existed for generations, people often stop questioning it, even when it causes suffering. Another reason harsh punishments existed was simple fear. Ancient rulers faced many threats. Invasions, rebellions. assassinations, political rivals, food shortages, economic troubles. Keeping control was not easy. Many leaders believed strict punishment helped maintain stability. If people feared the consequences of breaking the law, perhaps they would obey. At least that was the hope. History suggests the results were mixed. Some rulers created peace. Others created resentment. Many managed to do both at the same time. Human beings have always been complicated like that. As the sun set over ancient cities and villages, people lived with a constant awareness of authority. A local official could change your future. A ruler's decision could affect an entire community. An accusation could turn your life upside down. And once someone found themselves caught inside the machinery of ancient justice, getting out was often difficult. Very difficult. In the chapters ahead, we will explore what happened when that machinery began to move. We will walk through prisons, courts, and interrogation rooms. We will visit the great civilizations of Egypt, Greece, Persia, and Rome. And we will see how ordinary people sometimes found themselves trapped inside systems designed to enforce obedience through fear. But before any punishment could happen, there was usually a beginning. A knock at the door. A whisper from a neighbor. A suspicious glance from an official. An accusation. And for many ancient people, that accusation was the moment their real troubles began. So settle in, keep the torchlight burning low, and prepare yourself. Because in the next chapter, someone is about to be arrested. Imagine it is early morning. The sun has barely climbed above the horizon. The streets are quiet. A few merchants are setting up their stalls. Somewhere nearby, a dog is barking at absolutely nothing, proving that some things have never changed throughout history. You are getting ready for another ordinary day. Then there is a knock at the door. Or perhaps there is no knock at all. Maybe a group of guards simply appears. Maybe a local official calls your name. Maybe a neighbor points in your direction. Whatever happens, one thing becomes clear very quickly. Someone has accused you of a crime. And in the ancient world, that could be enough to change everything. Today, many legal systems require evidence before a person can be arrested. Ancient societies often worked differently. Sometimes accusations came after careful investigations. Sometimes they came from witnesses. And sometimes they came from angry neighbors, political rivals, jealous business partners, or people who simply wanted trouble. Human beings, unfortunately, have always been creative when it comes to making life difficult for one another. If you were unlucky enough to be accused, your first problem was often uncertainty. You might not even know exactly what you were accused of. Perhaps someone claimed you stole property. Perhaps someone accused you of refusing to pay taxes. Perhaps someone suggested you had spoken against a ruler. The details could vary. The fear was usually the same. Because once officials became interested in you, your daily life could disappear overnight. Imagine being led through the streets while people watch. Some neighbors avoid eye contact. Others stare openly. A few might whisper. Rumors spread faster than horses in every period of history. Ancient towns were no exception. By the end of the day, half the community might already have decided whether you were guilty, and they might reach that decision without hearing a single fact. Again, some things never change. After your arrest, you would likely be taken to some kind of holding area. Now, if you are imagining a modern prison, you should stop immediately. Ancient detention centers were often much simpler and much less comfortable. Sometimes prisoners were kept in small stone rooms. Sometimes underground chambers. Sometimes converted storage buildings. The purpose was not comfort. The purpose was keeping people from leaving. That was pretty much the entire design philosophy. The room might be dark. The air might be stale. The floor might be hard enough to make sleeping feel like an athletic challenge. And while waiting, you would have plenty of time to think. Too much time, probably. What would happen next? Would there be a trial? Would witnesses appear? Would anyone defend you? Would your family be allowed to visit? The answers depended greatly on where and when you lived. In some places, legal procedures existed. In others, officials enjoyed broad authority to make decisions themselves. That uncertainty could be terrifying. Many ancient prisoners spent days, weeks, or even months waiting for judgment. And during that time, fear often became its own form of punishment. Every sound outside the cell could make your heart race. Every approaching guard might bring news. Good news, bad news, or no news at all. Ancient records sometimes describe prisoners begging for information simply because not knowing was so difficult. Humans naturally want answers. When answers are missing, imagination usually steps in. And imagination can be very effective at creating worst-case scenarios. Meanwhile, officials would begin asking questions. Lots of questions. Where were you? Who saw you? Why would someone accuse you? Who are your friends? Who are your enemies? Some of these questions might seem reasonable. Others might feel impossible to answer. And remember, many ancient investigators already believed that accusations rarely appeared without a reason. That assumption could place enormous pressure on the accused. In some cases, authorities were genuinely trying to find the truth. In others, they were mainly trying to confirm what they already believed. There is a big difference between those two approaches. Unfortunately, not everyone recognized it. Political accusations could be especially dangerous. If an ordinary theft accusation was a storm cloud, an accusation involving rulers or governments was a thunderstorm. Ancient leaders worried constantly about conspiracies. Some fears were justified, others were not. But suspicion often spread quickly. A careless comment, a misunderstood joke, a conversation overheard by the wrong person. Any of these things could attract unwanted attention. And once politics entered the picture, mercy sometimes left the room. Family members suffered too. Imagine being the wife, husband, parent, or child of someone under arrest. You may not know where they have been taken. You may not know whether they are safe. You may not know when you will see them again. Ancient records often focus on rulers and officials, but ordinary families carried much of the emotional burden. A single accusation could affect an entire household. Income disappeared. Reputations suffered. Neighbors became cautious. Friends sometimes vanished. Support could be surprisingly fragile when trouble arrived. Of course, not every accused person was innocent. Some had committed crimes. Some had broken laws. Some had participated in conspiracies. Ancient authorities did occasionally catch the right person. The problem was that their methods did not always distinguish clearly between guilt and innocence. And when legal systems rely heavily on fear, mistakes become much more likely. As days passed, prisoners often learned to study every detail of their surroundings. The footsteps of guards, the sounds of other prisoners, the timing of meals, the movement of sunlight through small openings. Tiny observations became important. They provided structure inside a world filled with uncertainty, because uncertainty was everywhere. No one knew exactly when questioning would begin. No one knew what evidence existed. No one knew what punishment might follow. The future felt hidden behind a heavy door. And eventually, for many prisoners, that door would open. The waiting would end. The questions would become more serious. The pressure would increase. Officials would seek answers. Confessions. Information. Whether those answers were true or not sometimes became a secondary concern. And that is where our story moves next. Because in many ancient societies, the search for truth often took a dark turn. One that officials believed would reveal secrets. One that countless prisoners feared. In the next chapter, we travel to the banks of the Nile, where the great civilization of ancient Egypt developed its own system of law, punishment, and power. And for those who stood accused, the journey was only beginning.